California's Gold is produced in association with KCET Los Angeles and is seen statewide on California Public Television. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association.
Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell Hauser. Get ready for an adventure because we're getting ready to spend the whole day in one of the most beautiful, one of the most historic, and one of the most controversial places anywhere in our state. In fact, for almost 2 decades, this place was always in the news in a very contentious way. But thank goodness these days, all the controversy has passed. All that is left here today is this wonderful old forest. This forest, which is a fine example of California's gold. Okay, here we go. Our adventure begins. We're hooking up with
Chris Heppy
from the
Bureau of Land Management, Headwaters Forest Reserve.
Okay, you heard what I said, standing right over there by the trees. This is one of the most controversial places. Well, it's also beautiful and historic, but one of the most controversial places anywhere in our state. At least it was at one time. Why was it so controversial? What happened here?
Well, this was one of the last remaining unprotected stands of old-growth redwood. So there were a lot of folks that were very interested in protecting it, primarily because it was habitat for the endangered marble murrelet species. So there was very little old growth remaining. A lot of folks got together and wanted to see this area protected.
This was back in the 80s and the 90s, and it basically pitted the environmentalists who wanted to save the old growth redwood forest against the lumber company that owned this and wanted to use it for lumber for their business.
Right. Well, the activists wanted to see it protected. Naturally, the logging company, they were in the business of logging and wanted it logged. So that came together. The government agencies worked out a negotiation with the timber company, and so part of it was the creation of this reserve, 7,500 acres that consists of both old growth and second growth. Some of the area had been harvested, and then also the timber company had to create a habitat conservation plan which helped protect the remaining species on the rest of their ownership, which was about 200,000 acres.
So the lumber company up here still owns 200,000 acres. The Headwaters Forest Reserve is about 7,500 acres.
That's right, yeah.
Now you mentioned it was the habitat for what?
Marble murrelet, as well as other species.
What about that spotted owl? That was part of the controversy, too.
That's right. There are spotted owls here, as well as salmon and steelhead, which are also listed under the Endangered Species Act.
Are we going to see any spotted owls today?
Well, you may, if you hoot loud enough, one might come down for us.
You got to teach me how to hoot. I'm from the city. Anyway, here we are. We're going to be spending the whole day here. This is exciting because coming from L.A., you know, this was in the media a lot. Yeah. And this was the center of a lot of attention. There were thousands of people demonstrating here off and on for almost 2 decades, weren't there?
That's right. There were a lot of folks that were very dedicated, spent an awful lot of time working to protect this area.
All right, well, there are no demonstrators here today. All is quiet, all is peaceful, and we're getting ready to leave here because this is the Elk River Trailhead and head deep into the forest. Before we get started on our trip, you all are just ending your trip.
We sure are.
What did you do? How far into the forest did you go?
We didn't go that far, but we picked a lot of blackberries. And plums.
It's blackberry picking season. Now, are you all locals?
I am, and they're visiting from Washington, D.C.
So you had heard a lot about this controversy here at the Headwaters over the years.
Yes, I have.
Had you ever been here before? Did you?
Yes, I have.
And what do you think about the place?
I'm so glad that it's all preserved and they have this trail and we use it all the time and we love it.
Great. Everybody have a good time?
Yeah!
Everybody eating lots of blackberries?
Yeah!
Okay, now our adventure really begins because we have hiked about a mile from the trailhead through some absolutely beautiful countryside here. And Julie, we kind of met you impromptu up there with the blackberries, but officially you are the ranger here for the Bureau of Land Management.
That's right, Hugh.
And you are here to give us the story about the human history here, because it's not just about the trees. Well, it is about the trees, but it's not all old growth. At one time, there was a big logging operation going on right here, literally, and we got the picture to prove it.
That's exactly right. The town was called Falk, and it was founded in 1884 by a man named Noah Falk that actually came out from Ohio, saved his money, came out and took advantage of the Timber and Stone Act and built a town with many workers who worked here.
This is a huge operation right here. We got a mill here, we got a dam here, we've got houses here. And all of this was based upon logging timber for California.
That's exactly right. It was isolated, so the nearest store was Old Town Eureka, and back then there wasn't any automobiles. So to be out here, you literally had to create a town that people could live in.
Now, and when are we talking about? What is the time period?
1884 it was built until 1930. It thrived for about 40 to 50 years.
And the reason we have stopped right here is because, like the legend says, welcome to downtown Falk, California. This was it right here.
Yeah, and now it's just a forest.
Well, what happened to it? Let's take a downtown tour right now. What happened to downtown Falk?
Well, in 1937, the mill shut down for good, and it sat for about 40 years as a ghost town. And the lumber company was really concerned about people coming in the buildings. The buildings were starting to fall down, and they didn't want the liability, so they burned and bulldozed all the buildings in 1979.
Is this part of downtown Falk right here?
Yes, that's probably part of the smokestack that belonged to the mill, which stood right about in this location.
Well, this is a piece of history right here.
Yeah.
How do you just look at the old picture and superimpose it and figure out where everything was here?
Exactly. I've come across a lot of photographs over the years that people have collected through their history, brought it to the office, and then I've just looked over photographs after photographs and matched it up with the area.
What do you think life was like back here? Were there women and children here, or was this just a working lumber town?
There were bachelors, so there was bachelor cabins where two men would share a cabin, but also there was year-long residence where there was families that grew up here. In fact, in May, we had a woman that was 91 years old came out here, and she was born out here and lived here till she was 18.
Well, I got to tell you, you say it was isolated then. It's isolated now. So it was really isolated then. Was the money they made worth the isolation?
Yes, actually, they got paid very well, about 25 cents an hour, and that doesn't seem like a lot to our standards, but, you know, things cost a lot less back then.
And looking up here, now, in the picture, this was pretty thin up here, so a lot of this has literally grown back, hasn't it?
Yes, exactly. Usually when we first opened Headwaters about 10 years ago, this was all cleared, and you could actually see the ridge line, so you could see a little bit better with the photograph on where things were.
So these trees grow back pretty fast, don't they?
Yes, very quickly.
Wait a minute. I found something back here. I'm not the first to find this, though, am I?
No, you're not.
You knew about it. What is this?
This is actually part of the foundation of the mill, and the mill sat pretty much adjacent to this block here.
Wow, this was a lot of stonework done back here. It was hard to construct this mill, this town back here, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. I mean, think about in the 1800s, there was no electricity even here. So everything was steam operated, everything was done by hand, and everything was built by hand.
See, I bet if we rummaged around through here, there's an old log over there. That may have been part of it.
Yeah, it probably
There's
could.
probably all kind of stuff down in here.
Exactly.
That's kind of overgrown. You got a lot of ferns and trees and probably poison oak that I'm getting all over me out here.
No poison oak out here, thank God.
So you got to, come on, let's look some more. Chris, you're standing near something over here. This is exciting. This is what?
It's a bandsaw, and it came out of the mill, and it was uncovered a couple years ago, and we did some work.
Look at this.
What's really interesting is the first bandsaw ever to be used in the United States was used right here at the Falk Mill.
Really?
Yes.
Well, you should have this in a museum. This just shouldn't be sitting out here like this. This is going to rust away.
Yeah, we probably are going to have something in our education center and be able to protect this sort of thing.
Look at this.
Yep, that's part of it.
Now, this is heavy. This is serious. What is this?
This looks like part of a bar on a chainsaw.
Chris, do you know, have you done any research on any of this?
I just know it looks like a chainsaw bar, so I would say
pretty big one
and
at
they
that.
needed big ones.
Wow. So when they left here, when they shut down in
1937.
They just walked away.
They just walked away. It was like time stood still. Things were left in the bookshelves. There was a piano left in the dance hall. All the dishes left in the cookhouse.
Okay, now we've come just a little ways from beautiful downtown Falk, California, and we're standing here. This is one of the prettiest sights I think I've ever seen, with this big tree with all the moss and then the water down here, and that water is very important to the story of what happened here.
Exactly. They used to float the logs down when it was Falk, when there was a town here, and that's how they transported the logs to the mill, and then they had a train that would actually take it out to Humboldt Bay.
So they floated logs down from what, the back country?
Yeah, about 2 miles upriver. They actually logged pretty close up in the hills. They would float the logs down the river to a dam, if you'll notice in the picture that you guys were looking at.
Then they would put them from the water onto a little train?
Yep, from the water onto a train, and then hoist it into the mill the wood, and cut it up, and then take it out by train to Humboldt Bay.
So this was kind of a complicated, there was a lot of moving of wood going on here.
Yeah, a lot of hard work too.
Now, what is this called? What's this water called?
This is the Elk River watershed. And the reason why they actually call it the Headwaters Forest is it's the Elk River watershed begins at the beginning up in the old growth and runs through here to
The Headwaters.
the beginning of the
Elk River.
right.
Okay, we found 2 more people hiking down the trail. You're coming from downtown Falk.
Yeah.
You remember? Well, no, you don't remember Falk.
No, I don't remember, but thanks for thinking I do.
Who does remember Falk around here?
My dad does.
Really?
Yeah. He grew up in Eureka and all his brothers and sisters, and he remembers coming down here when there were buildings and stuff. They'd already left, but the buildings were
It's a
still
ghost
standing.
town that sat here forever.
Yeah. And
Wow. Well, what's it like coming back?
Oh, it's really
There's
cool.
nothing to see. I mean, it's a beautiful nature walk.
Yeah,
but
well, that's the point. It was a beautiful nature walk. Yeah, we went all the way up.
Lots of first growth trees up at the top.
yeah.
There's plenty to see.
Now, what does first growth mean?
Means they haven't been cut down and replaced by second growth trees.
Yeah.
They're the old growth that,
Yes.
that everybody was trying to say.
Yeah, there were no stumps up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going to go next. We've been down here looking at Falk, but we're going to go now where you were and see these old growth trees, and they're worth a visit, aren't
Oh,
they?
absolutely.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
worth the hike.
Okay, this is exciting. Our first spotting of 3 big old growth redwood trees, right, Chris? Look at them up there. They really make a majestic statement.
Sorry to tell you, Huell, these are not old-growth trees. As big and majestic as they are, they're actually sprouts from this stump here, which really was an old-growth tree that was cut as probably one of the first trees, or an early tree when they were logging this area. And redwood has the tremendous capacity to resprout from the base, the burl tissue at the base of redwoods. So these trees grew probably somewhere over 100 years ago.
From the stump of a redwood tree that would have been felled here when the lumber mill was in progress.
That's right.
And 3 of them grew up out of that one stump.
Which is very typical. Once a tree is cut or damaged, redwood has an amazing capacity to resprout from that burl tissue. And oftentimes there are multiple stems, and they oftentimes fuse together and kind of thin themselves out over time.
Well, I'm disappointed, but not really, because I got to tell you, I don't care if these are old growth or not. This is an absolutely magnificent statement right here from these 100-year-old redwood trees.
Right, and we'll see even bigger ones.
All right, now we kind of got sidetracked because we came to this particular spot because, Julie, you told me the town was gone. There's part of the town still here.
Yeah, this is actually the engine house, and it was across the river from Falk. And last year, about 80% of it was restored and put piece by piece together, and we're going to make an education center out of it.
What do you mean, the engine house?
It is where the Falk train parked every night.
And this was the train that took the wood from the pond, from the water, up to the mill, and then after the wood was milled, took it all the way into town, into Eureka.
Exactly.
So this is very historic.
Yes, exactly. It was built around 1900.
Okay, our adventure continues, and to continue this adventure, we had to drive in the official BLM SUV through some of that 200,000 acres that is still owned, privately owned by one of the big lumber companies. They're still cutting trees around this part of California. And of course, the high point of that trip was going down that windy, dusty, bumpy road, and we came across a mother deer and 2 of her little fawns. That was very exciting to see that. But now we have arrived. This is the high point of our trip, and Chris, we are now in the old growth forest right here, aren't we?
That's right. Many of these trees, the redwoods that you see, are over 1,000 years old. This is the upper part of the Salmon Creek watershed and an important part of the reserve.
1,000-year-old trees, and of course it's hard for our camera to capture the majesty of where we are, but we are surrounded, and you get this overwhelming feeling when you stand here. And now there's a tree right there that is huge. Is that 1,000 years old?
It could be. It's hard to say just based on the size, but it's a very large old tree. Being on the ridge top like we are, the size of the trees isn't as great as you find in the alluvial flats. And also you find a mix of some Douglas fir trees up in this area. It's a little drier, a little more windy, but still you see some tremendous old growth redwood.
But they're climbing up to the sun, aren't they?
That's right. Yeah, they need all the factors, the moisture, sunlight, and good soil conditions to grow. Now,
why is it important? Now, I know aesthetically, when you look around here, and look at this, Cameron, just all the way around are these beautiful, beautiful old trees. Aesthetically, I understand why it's important to save them. Why do you tell me and other Californians that it's important to save these trees?
That's a great question. They provide tremendous habitat for a number of species that have evolved with them over many, many years. And the type of habitat that's provided by these old growth trees, there's tremendous structure way up high in those trees. The typical redwood tree will break off over a few hundred feet and it'll resprout new limbs or new treetops. Those are called reiterations. So up in the canopy, there's this structural diversity that you just don't find in many other forests.
And things live up there.
That's right. We talked earlier about the marble murrelet is one species that depends on
What is
these
that,
large,
a bird?
That's a bird that goes out to the ocean to feed, and then it nests in large redwood trees. So
we'll put a picture of that up on the
Okay,
screen
good,
right now
good.
because I don't think we're going to spot any right now.
Right.
The spotted owl is up there.
Yeah, we have spotted owls that nest here in the reserve.
The infamous spotted owl that we've heard
Right.
so much about over the years.
That's right. We have spotted owls here, and their populations actually are declining partly because of competition with a barred owl species that's kind of moving in on their range. So we're trying to study that dynamic as well.
So there's more here in this old growth forest than just the trees themselves. It's the whole ecosystem, the whole life cycle system
Right.
for animals and birds and all the other things that these old growth forests provide.
And what makes it so special is that these areas are very unique in size. The range, almost 96% of the historic range of coast redwoods has been cut. So there's only 4% that's left of these old growth forests. So there's very few spots. So the habitat is fragmented. There's just little postage stamps around.
That's why it's so important to save them, because we're down to our last 4% here in California.
That's right. It's about 20 miles to the south to where you find an intact grove, and another 30 miles to the north to Redwood National and State Park. So they're just little blocks. So that habitat, the islands that remain, are really important to protect.
Well, we came up here today. Now, Julie, you bring people up here on hikes, don't you? Even though this is, you have to cross privately owned lumber company land to get here.
Yes, people call our office and make reservations, and then I meet them down below by the gate and open up the gate, and we drive up, we carpool up 4 miles, and then we do about a 2-mile hike into the old growth.
Because not many people have the opportunity to see this, to feel this, to experience what this is like.
Yeah, sometimes, I'll have people that may have been grumpy on their trip, and they and they come into the old growth, and you could just see on their faces how calm they get as they walk through the forest.
Because there really is something, and that's what always makes me a little nervous when we try to film something like this. It's kind of hard to translate it on film, isn't it? You almost have to be here.
Yeah, it's very difficult. People try to take snapshots out in the old growth, but they just can't get that height and that feeling that you have when you are actually in old growth forest.
Yeah, and the old growth, just like you said, Chris, we're looking at this huge, the trunk of the tree. We can look up and see part of the tree through there, but we're really missing part of the most important part of the old growth forest because we can't even see everything that's going on up there.
Right. That's what makes it really unique, is that biomass and the structural diversity that's hundreds of feet in the air. Most other forests just don't have that.
Blue paint. Blue is my favorite color, but not on a tree, right, Chris?
Well, that blue paint indicates that this tree was slated to be harvested prior to the establishment of the reserve.
So this tree, under circumstances that existed just a few years ago, would have been cut down.
That's right. It just happens to be on the inside of the boundary, which we're close to right now.
Boy, looking up this tree, you could make a whole house out of one tree.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually. You could make several houses out of
one
tree.
tree?
Yeah, there's enough wood in them.
Good wood, too.
Oh, outstanding wood. It's a tremendous lumber
Let's walk
species.
down here. I'm walking down here like I know what I'm doing. I guess there are no animals down here, are there?
No,
Nothing's gonna bite me?
I think you're safe.
What do I need to look out for?
Well, there is a lot of downed wood down here, and that's actually an important part of the ecological function here. When these trees fall, they create nursery systems for the plants to grow up on.
Yeah, there's a lot of undergrowth and needles and...
Right. Those provide habitat for critters on the ground as well as soil moisture.
Stop. Look at this. And there's an echo almost too, but looking up at this. Now, here's a sight I haven't seen before because the forest is kind of open. You can see these trees and how big and magnificent they are.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're kind of on the ridge top, so the canopy tends to be a little more open here, as well as this is kind of right on the boundary of the reserve, so that it's a little more open, and it is tough to see in other places.
This is as beautiful a shot of huge old 1,000-year-old redwoods as I have seen anywhere in California, don't you think?
It's very nice. There are a lot of them.
Well, we're ending up this day-long adventure in a part of the forest that's not nearly as overwhelming and majestic as standing amongst those 1,000-year-old redwood trees. But Chris, you brought us here because this is part of the future story of this part of California.
That's right. About 4,400 acres of the reserve is second growth or cut over areas. So we're looking at an area here that was harvested probably 20 to 30 years ago, and you can see the stumps from those trees that were harvested.
It was clear cut. There wasn't anything standing here.
That's right. And what happens afterwards, trees come back in, but it tends to be dominated by Douglas fir species rather than redwood. And over time, they crowd each other out. The stand kind of stagnates. So what we've done, part of our restoration program, is to go in, thin out those Douglas fir trees, not all of them, but enough to give more room for the redwoods so that they can grow. And we've kind of just kick-started the process of allowing this forest to regenerate and move towards some of those conditions that we looked at previously in the old growth area.
So 1,000 years from now, whoever's doing the television program then and whoever's head of BLM out here then will be standing in front of, well, here are 3 redwoods right here that someday, hopefully, will be 1,000 years old and will be magnificent because of what you're doing today.
We hope so, and providing habitat and all those functions of the ecosystem that we're looking for. So.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you all for a wonderful day. I think we've all learned so much. We've learned about the human history up here, the history, the ecological history of the redwood trees themselves. We've seen the future of the forest here. Of course, the lumber industry, the timber industry was so much a part of the lifestyle and the economy of California in the past, and in many ways it's still a part of our economy and our lifestyle. But isn't it wonderful that this old growth forest, this Headwaters Forest Reserve, how many acres is it?
7,500 total.
7,500 acres have been saved and preserved for future generations. This 4% of the remaining redwood old growth forest, this and other places around our state have been saved and preserved for future generations to see it and enjoy it just like we have today. This old growth forest, very much a part of California's gold. We have had an absolutely wonderful and inspirational day here in the forest. Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell Hauser, and I sure hope you enjoyed our day-long adventure in that spectacular old-growth forest on our state's northern coast. If you'd like to go on this adventure again, share it with family or friends, or more importantly, donate a copy to your local school or library, well, it's available on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.